exchange and a closer look at Tunisia and what lies ahead for the country. We're joined live now by political analyst Youssef Sherif, who is the director of the Columbia Global Center's Tunis. Youssef, thank you so much for being with us. So let's start with the demonstrations we saw last weekend. I mean, the fact that it took place around the anniversary of the revolution, the Arab Spring, a key date in the Arab Spring, in fact, what does that tell us?
You know, Tunisia has been through a series of demonstrations since 2010, and it never ended. But since 2021, mid-2021, when the president accelerated all powers, there were less and less demonstrations. So that makes the demonstration of last Saturday quite important, because there were actually thousands of people in the streets. It is not as big as the demonstrations that took place in 2011 or 2013, but still, people are still going out in the street. And it shows that people are still very angry in the country. And so we've seen Tunisians from all the colors of the spectrum demonstrating. We've seen groups that actually do not agree on anything in Tunisian society and politics demonstrating the same day. The trick here is that they did demonstrate the same day for the same reason. I mean, they all were scanding slogans against the president. They were also in the same area, in the same street, but each demonstrating in a separate location of that same neighborhood or same street. And that's because the political groups in Tunisia and politics in Tunisia is so polarized that these groups, although they agree that they are all opposed to the president, they cannot have a unified front, which makes those demonstrations important, but not as important as they could have been, especially that all these groups do agree that their problem today is the president of the republic.
Okay, and so for people who might not be following this, just explain to us what people are so upset about. I mean, it's not just the fact that the president consolidated his power and, you know, obviously democracy is certainly being challenged in Tunisia. It's also the economic issues happening in Tunisia right now. We saw the images a second ago of the food shortages, the empty shelves, fuel scarcity, rampant inflation. I think inflation in Tunisia is something like 10%. I mean, just walk us through what people are upset about.
So that's what the opposition groups are trying to do, to capitalize on the anger that is in the street and make the majority of the population follow them against the president. Because for the political groups, the goal is to topple the president. But for a majority of Tunisians, the problem is the economic situation. The problem is what you just showed, the fact that they can't find milk, the fact that things are getting more and more expensive. And for them, this is why many of them do not want to participate in politics anymore. This is why we see very low turnouts in elections, in referenda, and in political participation in general, because for a majority of Tunisians, democracy became synonymous with economic collapse. And that's why we are in this situation today. That's why the president was able to kind of close the chapter of democracy in Tunisia in 2021, and very few people did oppose him, because for a majority of Tunisians, the problem today is the economic situation. But what they are discovering now is that even when you destroy democracy, even if you give all the powers in the hands of one man, things do not necessarily improve, and their economic situation will continue to deteriorate because, as I mentioned, it's a messy economic situation, but one has to link it with the broader problems that are happening in the world, the war on Ukraine, post-COVID, the global recession that everyone is expecting in 2023. Tunisia actually has been through a decade of political turmoil and terrorism. So all this together makes the situation very hard to solve, and to improve. And that explains why Tunisians are angry today. But again, what the political groups are trying to do is to use all that anger against the president, and so far they are not necessarily succeeding in doing that.
Right. So then what is the solution? I mean, obviously they're calling for the president to step down. obviously President Saeed is not going to say, okay, you know what, you're right, I'm going to step down. I mean, in fact, he's doing the opposite. He's consolidating power, taking over the legislative and judicial branches as well. But if the opposition groups can't agree on anything, if there's no unity between the opposition groups, if people sort of hate him for different reasons and they can't really come together, then Tunisia sort of remains at this standstill. So what happens next?
Exactly. And as long as these kind of demonstrations remain one-offs, the president is simply saying, okay, let them demonstrate, and the day after, most people will forget about them. And that's what has been happening over the last 2 years. And again, you add to that to the fact that a lot of people are completely fed up with politics. These demonstrations end up just a few pictures. I mean, what remains of them are a few pictures, and we talk about them, and that's it. Now, there is a player that is not yet in the street, and that's the labor union, the UGTT, the very influential labor union that won the Nobel Prize in 2014. And the UGTT did not want to join the protesters on Saturday, but they are planning their own strikes because they themselves have problems with the president. I mean, the thing with the current president is that he's not able to make allies. He's making a lot of enemies around him. And the UGTT is starting to move the street against him. So for now, I think we have to wait for the UGTT and what the UGTT will do, and whether the streets, whether the angry citizens that we're talking about will follow the UGTT. And this is more or less what happened in 2010, 2011, when dictatorship ended, because there was anger in the street, and actually UGTT was the one that was able to channel that anger and take it forward. So maybe we will see more and more demonstrations and strikes in the upcoming days. And again, the UGTT is the big player here, and whether the UGTT is able to find an agreement with the president or not will be the answer to what will happen next.
Right, I mean, we'll see, because a lot of people are saying that actually the situation in Tunisia is actually worse. It's worse now than it was when Ben Ali was deposed, 10, 12 years ago. Yusuf, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for being with us.